What do you mean you're doing CrossFit? You're 35 years old. You're only going to put your back out. Same old story. How many times have you heard this? From your partner, from your friends, from the guys in the gym? I can guarantee that the person that has said this to you more than once has never been to a CrossFit class before. And if they have, two scenarios. They've either been to a gym with a really, really bad coach, or they've been for a drop-in session on holiday. Because everyone who's in CrossFit and has stayed in CrossFit understands that injuries are not through CrossFit itself, but through the coaching and the methodology of the gym and the coaches. Just like any other sport. Now, I promise by the end of this episode, you're going to actually understand why this myth exists and why it is a myth, but also how to bulletproof yourself from injury. Guess what? CrossFit is probably one of the lowest rates of injury across exercise modalities and sports. Wow, I bet you never guessed that. So, the reputation that CrossFit has does come from social media. Of course, like anything else. The viral clips. The guy trying to do handstand walk and falling over. The guy jumping on boxes and unfortunately breaking his ankle. The guy on the rings and the rings disintegrating his hand. These are very, very rare occasions. But because people like to poke fun at things that they can't do themselves, CrossFit is often the punchline. And I can bet my bottom dollar that if you got into CrossFit, it would be very, very rare for you to see this. Because I've been training now for 2.5 years, just over. I've been to multiple competitions, I've trained at multiple gyms, and I've not really seen any, if many, injuries occur other than the normal ones, which you're probably going to find in any other normal gym anyway. It really is just social media hype around CrossFit because some of the movements might look a little bit nuanced to you, and that's just because you haven't done them before. Of course, like any sport, you can get hurt in CrossFit. If you try to lift too much weight without the right technique, you will get hurt. If you overtrain and do too much on a regular basis, you will probably get hurt. If you have a bad coach who can't correct your form, who can't coach properly and tells you just to keep going, you're probably going to get hurt. But put those scenarios in any other sport and it's very likely that you're going to get hurt. This is just the standard of fitness. This is just a standard protocol of training. It doesn't mean that CrossFit's bad for you. It's the way it's being taught to you that could be the bad. Why this is quite an unfair statement for CrossFit, or quite an unfair stigma is a better word. You know, at the end of the day, you're only seeing the highlights of the guy falling off the box and breaking his ankle because the shock is what gets views, gets follows, gets likes. But you're missing out on the core of CrossFit. The 50-plus-year-old man getting his PR deadlift. The 65-year-old woman being able to squat freely without pain for the first time in years. The young children learning how to do gymnastics, learning how to use their body. You don't see that shit because it's not entertaining enough. People want to see people fail. People want to see people fall. And that's why, if you've not been in a CrossFit gym before, you have this perception of the sport. I've been in the sport for a relatively long time now compared to, yourself. And I've never been injured directly within a CrossFit competition or class because I've always had fantastic coaches. I've always been in a very safe environment. And the only times that I have been injured is probably through my own fault. Overtraining, lifting too heavy, not doing the right formal technique. That's on me, not on CrossFit. If you're doing CrossFit now or you've ever done it before, and the likelihood is that you have if you're watching this video, what do you think about it? And how does that compare to when you first started? Because I'll admit, before I went to a CrossFit gym, before I first did my first ever class in 2023 November, I wasn't quite sure what to think of it, but I could imagine it being fairly culty. I could imagine there being one or two guys and gals in there who, were quite high level and maybe looked down on everyone else. I could imagine it being a very competitive environment, almost to the point where I wasn't quite sure I wanted to put myself in there. And now I know I have absolutely no regrets about going in that gym. And the things that I thought about it are somewhat true, but on a different side of the spectrum. Of course it's competitive, but you've got people cheering for you. Of course you have your elite athletes, but they're probably the best coaches and best role models in there. Just because it's a sport where there are going to be different levels of experience, different levels of skill, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad environment. I come from football, and let me tell you, a football background can be quite nasty, even amongst your own teammates, especially if you don't have a good team bond. But I can't think of a CrossFit gym I've ever been to where it has that bad blood. And I've been to gyms with, quite high level athletes, semi-finalists. In fact, I'm training with one right now, and she's lovely, lovely girl. Really, really helpful. Coaches, people without, if she sees something that she wants to coach. And that's the point. That's CrossFit. It's like a family. And I know this might sound like I'm getting you to try and join the cult, but it's a good cult. So, the reality check. And I'm going to find some statistics and put this alongside my head so you can see that I'm not just sprouting bullshit. But when you compare CrossFit to other sports, especially contact sports, the rate of injury is far, far lower. When you compare it to casual running, it's almost 5 times less likely or less frequent to get injured. Think about that, running, because when you decide to run, you don't have a coach telling you how to run, how far to run, how to fuel yourself. Whenever you step in a CrossFit gym, you always have at least one, most of the time 2 coaches around you. And very likely within the CrossFit gym itself, you're going to have another coach training. It's a very, very safe environment. So just like anything, it's not the sport of CrossFit that breaks you, that will break anyone. It's the dosage, it's the way it's applied, it's the rushing through the stages. But I can tell you, if you do it properly, you stay methodical, you absorb the learning opportunity within CrossFit, you will become a much more capable human being. And that goes for anyone, not just someone who's sat there unfit and hasn't moved for the last couple of years. That goes for the bodybuilder who might be as strong as an ox but can't touch his toes. That might be for the marathon runner who has probably the best endurance. But when you step in a CrossFit gym, you can actually start to lift some decent weights. It is, in my opinion, and we're all entitled to my opinions, the best form of fitness available right now. But you know what the biggest risk to your body is? It's doing what I'm doing now. Nothing. Being sat there, being sedentary, avoiding challenge, physical challenge, because the saying's true. Use it or lose it. And that's very much the case when it comes to your strength, your mobility, your endurance, your flexibility, your coordination, your agility. All these components of fitness have to constantly be trained or you will lose them. And that's not a nice place to be in. So if you think about the guys in your gym that are on a little bit of an older side, maybe they've got 10, 20 years on you, and you're thinking, how do these people keep themselves active, keep themselves fit? They look like 20-year-old, in terms of the way they move, in terms of the weights they're moving and lifting. How do they do it? Have a think, because we'll get to that answer shortly. Why do people actually get injured when they get over 30? Well, one of the biggest reasons I probably see is the ego. You might have been a really good athlete when you were in your 20s, and you've probably took some time off because you had children, because you moved to a different town, a different city, a different country, and you jump back into that gym thinking that you can do exactly what you did 10 years ago. No, you can't. That is just straight up injury hazard. You're also a very competitive person, and the guy next to you who's been training for, maybe 2 or 3 years in that gym, he's got to quite a decent level, he's doing all the movements at RX standard, and you think, what, I can do that too. No, you have to stay in your lane, especially when it comes to a sport like CrossFit, just like martial arts. You wouldn't walk in to a jiu-jitsu gym on your first day and challenge the black belt. unless you're damn stupid, because you're just going to get twisted up like a pretzel. Think of it in the same way as CrossFit. You try and do a bar muscle up on day one after not even learning kipping pull-up. You're going to fuck yourself over. Trust me. Again, we're skipping stages, but we always forget that CrossFit has a base strength, and that's for everything that you do. The gymnastics, you need to be able to hold your body, to push your body, to pull your body. The weightlifting, you need to be able to hit the weights, lift the weights, hold the weights, and then technique comes after. But not having a strong strength base and rushing into these high level movements, it's only going to lead to injury. If not straight away, over a period of time. Linked to the ego, if you refuse to scale, you're an idiot. Because even though you might have this assumption that you are an athlete, that you're strong, you're fit, you're coming from one sport potentially into a brand new one. You have to meet yourself where you're at. Now, your progress might be faster than the average person. That's fine. But I can bet my bottom dollar, even Matt Fraser, the 5-time champion of CrossFit, probably started out by scaling his workouts. I say probably, he definitely started out by scaling his workouts. There's no shame in it. In fact, it adds another level of motivation, because when you start to see yourself moving into more RX workouts, learning the RX movements, getting up to the RX weights, great, fantastic. It's a fantastic feeling. If you jump straight into the RX of the workout and you can't do the movement, or worse, you injure yourself doing the movement, then that's your own fault and you feel like a bit of a dummy. Now, I know I'm only young, I'm 31, but even I realise my 31-year-old self is different to my 25-year-old self. Sleep, for me, is the biggest changer. I used to be able to operate well off maybe 5 hours sleep. Now, if I don't get at least 7 hours, I feel it, not just in my tiredness, but in my body. You've also got to consider your diet. Now, I like a beer as much as the next man, but if you're drinking every other night in the week, loads over the weekend, kiss goodbye to your progress. You're literally blunting the recovery process of the body. I'm not saying you have to give it up, but be a little bit more conscious of it. Your food. You can't be living off McDonald's. The gym life, where you're trying to build muscle, calories in versus calories out, might have once served you well, but as you get older, those McDonald's aren't going to do you much. You have to eat good, wholesome, nutritious food. Not all the time. You can still have your snacks, still have your treats, but when it comes to your overall diet, the majority should be whole food based. Focus on protein, good source of carbohydrates, and plenty in fruit and vegetables. So, how do you actually do it right? Well, you've got to consider where you're at first and foremost. Link back to what I was saying before. You don't want to be jumping in at the deep end, particularly when it's something that has so many intricate details and skills that you've got to learn. Just as CrossFit, you can't jump in at the deep end, otherwise you're going to jump straight back out. Now, the way I'm structuring my approach to my competition season is probably not going to be the way you do it, but the framework's there. 3 days on, 1 day off. 2 days on, 1 day off. Those days off are just as, if not even more important than the days on, because that's where I recover. Food is very consistent. It's very carb rich, a consistent level of protein, and guess what? Most of it comes from the real world, not a packet. Alcohol is still present, but it's very much minimized, and sleep is looked at as a priority. No more one more show on Netflix or 3-hour films starting at 11 p.m. We need to get to bed consistently and make sure we get that good quality sleep in. And when it comes to the training itself, again, we look at the technical flaws in my skill movements. We break them down. We work on them bit by bit. Whilst I'm working on those movements, we're not thinking about lifting heavy. We're just thinking about executing the technique. Technique first, weight after. My fitness base is already there. Luckily, I've been able to sort of withhold that since my younger years. And of course, that's not just because I played football when I was younger, but I've constantly looked after myself in that regards. So for me, it's all about working on the weaknesses first to make sure that the tools are sharpened and I'm more, shall we say, capable across the board. And there has to be a mindset shift And I think that not only comes with getting older, but having a real goal, like in the calendar, something where you're going to be tested against other people. When you're, let's say, training bodybuilding and just training for physique, you don't really have a definitive date. You might do a bodybuilding show, you might do a photo shoot, but that's few and far between. Most people I know just train at the gym just to keep themselves fit, healthy, and look good. But it's far too easy to tell yourself, well, it's just a drink. I'll start my diet on Monday and all the excuses. When you have a clear timeline, it almost gives you a newfound focus. Of course, it gives you a focus. And everything you do actually becomes more considered. How is it going to affect my training tomorrow? How is it going to affect my recovery tomorrow? I've only got 6 weeks to this competition. I can't be, shooting myself in the foot now, etc., etc. And you've got to give it more priority. Gone are the days where you could drink all night and wake up in the morning as fresh as a daisy. I know I was able to do that, and now that's not a thing. So that mindset shift really has to come from you, and you have to find the thing that's important enough for you to do that, because you ain't getting any younger. And if you want to do something now in terms of test yourself physically, then unfortunately time isn't on our side. Yes, I would always advocate for whatever your age, you can do it, but the longer you leave it, the harder it's going to be. That's absolutely no question. So I had a question of a client this week, and basically those who have watched some of my content, of course my clients, they know that I'm at the moment dealing with a couple of injuries. Nothing too serious, but some chronic injuries that aren't really going away. And he just asked me, how are you dealing with them? How do you keep training yet you have these injuries? How do you feel about yourself in that regards? And I said to him, quite simply, prioritizing recovery whilst training around the injury. So I'm making sure that I'm not doing anything to aggravate. And if there is something that aggravates the injury, we pull away, we adapt. But prioritizing recovery like I've never done before. Actually going and paying for a good physio to see and look at what's going on. Actually ensuring that my diet is completely on point and I'm fueling myself properly. Actually ensuring that my sleep quality and length is optimal. Because without those things, I'm only going to delay this injury process. So if you have anything chronic, maybe your knees don't feel so good, maybe your elbows a little bit sore, don't just hope for it to go away. We don't recover like we used to as kids. That shit needs to get seen to, and the quicker you do it, more often than not, the quicker it's going to go. That would be my advice to you from the client question of the week. Going back to the start of this question, will CrossFit break you after 30? Absolutely not, with the caveat being, if you follow the advice, the right protocols, the right framework, get yourself a good coach, and take your time. If you are looking for a new challenge in fitness and you want to really see where you are as an athlete, you want to see what might excite you in the near future, then I've got a 2-minute quiz that can really give you some great ideas, if not the perfect answer. The link's below in the comments. Just take the quiz, get your results, and we'll go from there. So next week, it's a big one, episode 5. Wow, we've made it to 5 already. This is going to be the actual 90-day roadmap that not only I'm going to follow, but you would get from day 1 working with me right up until the competition floor. So if you have that goal in mind, make sure you're there. And guess what? I'll see you on the competition floor. Peace out.